Welcome, Mage. I'm Rhino.
And I'm Papa Mage, and this is the
Extreme Casual
MTG Podcast. So, on today's podcast, we're going to talk about different types of Magic the Gathering players, but we're not going to be talking about the same ones that Mark Rosewater wrote in an article about years ago, where he named them Timmy and Johnny and Spike. Those are more about what they play and how they play those games. And we want to talk more about unusual habits. Now, we do have one that is kind of a honorable mention. We've got 5 that we want to talk about, and this one is a kind of a 6th one. And this is Mr. Board Wipe Tribal. Now, you can guess from the name that Mr. Board Wipe Tribal did
board wipes.
And he did them constantly.
He was scared of one creature.
Or anything. It's like, oh, you just played a Soul Ring. That scares me. And board wipe. So those games ended up being really, really, really long and really, really boring because Mr. Board Wipe Tribal didn't have any win conditions. Just kept wiping the board. So you had to have some way around board wipes. And I believe Rhino made his Egg Lady deck so that anytime there was a board wipe, he would have more creatures come out. And that stopped that from happening. But we haven't seen Mr. Board Wipe Tribal in quite some time. So getting on to our first one is actually going to be one where I talk about on the way back machine. We're going back to 1993.
Way before I was born.
And way before I even met Rhino's mom to be. So this was an in-store tournament. And this person we're going to call Mr. Twitchy. So it was the first in-store tournament. This was before the first regional gathering of Magic players for what was probably the precursor to the Grand Prix. And you've got to remember that this is back when the decks were 40-card decks. You played for ante. There was no Swiss rules, so the competitions were very much single or double elimination. So if you had a single game loss, you were pretty much out of it. Well, Mr. Twitchy was, I assume, was extremely nervous because he would tap and untap things. And it was just a constant barrage of tapping and untapping. And I seem to recall he had a pretty simple deck, like a mono red deck. So there wasn't a lot of decisions, especially back then with only the one set as the card set to pull from. And so I believe he got a game loss because the judge at the time, which was the store owner, because there wasn't any official judges, we couldn't figure out what he was trying to do. And so he was just constantly twiddling the cards on and off, and it was just difficult to keep up with him. So that was back in 1993 with Mr. Twitchy. Now, Rhino's got one from when we started RVing.
Yeah, and
this is
Mr. Explosion. This guy.
Okay, you were playing, what were you playing?
I was playing Taste of Karlov.
A commander deck that you had just started.
I just started playing it. It was my first time playing it. And I drew my 7 and he built he liked putting counters on one creature. And he knocked someone out, and then I drew this one card and be like, okay, keep putting that. keep putting that one creature on that creature.
Yeah, Rhino would say, "Go ahead, keep putting more counters on that. I can't do anything
Um,
about that." But Rhino had a whole bunch of chump blockers.
a whole bunch of jump rockers. Zombies with
Flying.
flying wings. And um then I play this card called Consume. I and it says target player sacrifices their biggest creature that they have. And I think it was like a A3, A5. They're like, okay.
Yeah, and then you ended up gaining life equal to that creature's power.
Yeah, and uh, he, I don't know what to say about him.
Yeah, well, he was very explicit in a lot of his words when that happened. But still, it was a good game, and I believe he enjoyed the game and enjoyed the amazing turnaround because he was going to win, and then Rhino played that card and just overtook the game. So before we get into the next one, if you have any players with interesting habits, put them in the comments below. And if you're listening on the podcast, well, you can always jump over to YouTube and put them in the comments there. So we'd love to hear some of your interesting players, but I'm going to talk about Mr. All Talk. And this was before we started RVing. We had a local game store that we went to all the time. And there was a person that we ended up, he showed up, and, you don't want to look down at somebody because of the cards that they have and stuff like that. The fact that they don't have the sleeves and all that. He didn't have any sleeves, and he obviously didn't know how to build a deck. He just had 100 cards thrown together, random, and he would talk about how he got the cards from a friend of his, and they were all really, really good cards. I think every last one of them was a common, uh, and he could put a creature down on turn 7 almost every time, but by then he had already lost because he had no ramp or any ability like that. Well, we taught him how to build a deck and how to do the ramp, and we helped him get a cards and stuff like that. But the thing about Mr. All Talk is he kept talking all the time. And he would come in with his new deck that he made, and he would tell you everything about that deck before the game. He would tell you everything about that deck during the game. He would tell you all about what he was going to play during the game. He just it couldn't shut up. Moments of silence was a time for him to talk about his deck. And so he didn't win very many games, but everybody knew every single card in his deck and what he was playing and when he was playing it constantly. So Rhino's got one now, and it is.
Um, there was a friend that I um taught magic to, and uh, and he didn't want to attack. Um, he just wanted to build up his board state.
So we call this person I'm just here. And yeah, as Rhino would say, he just loved playing. He loved putting counters on creatures and putting auras on and doing equipment, but he would never attack.
Hammer.
And did he ever have a problem with you hitting for damage or anything like that?
No.
No, just loved being there, just loved playing the game, and that was it. And to this day, I think he still plays that way, and he just loves being there, playing, and he doesn't care if he wins or loses. Well, I don't know if he would care if he won because I don't think he ever did, but He just loves being there and playing. And the last one we're going to call I'm Shiny. Now, this is a person that had to have their board state absolutely pristine. The land was laid out perfectly. The library was perfectly tiled up and perfectly laid out. And you know how you have a tendency to toss cards into the graveyard? His graveyard was perfectly laid out. When creatures were, when he had to tap, they were a perfect 90 degrees. And if it wasn't perfect, he would adjust it. So obviously somebody was very OCD, and we don't want to say that OCD is bad. I mean, some
It's good.
yeah, people like that. I like having my board state nice and straight. Rhino doesn't necessarily. Uh, it's just as long as he knows what's going on, he's fine. And well, but the other thing about this person, which is why we call him I'm Shiny, is because every single card had to be foil. Every land, every common, every uncommon, all had to be foil. And he would trade with us to get those foils, and a lot of times to his disadvantage. And we would try, no, it's not worth that much. And he's like, oh no, it's fine by me, and he'd pay like or he would trade us a dollar card for a 12-cent foil just so he could have the foil. And every card in his deck had to be foil, every last one. And if it wasn't foil, it wouldn't go in until he got a foil version. And even to the point where the sleeves that he had on the deck, if one of them got like a little dent on it or something, next week he'd play the same deck, but with new sleeves. Uh, and so this was a very interesting person to play with. And I don't know how many games that they won, but this was back when we were playing standard and everything had to be foil for him. Um, and so it was just one of those other interesting habits that we see of people. So those are our top five: Twitchy, Mr. Explosion, All Talk, I'm Just Here, and I'm Shiny. So if you have any others that you'd like to tell us about, please put them in the comments. Uh, I know we're a little
Yeah.
sporadic with our Extreme Casual MTG podcast, but hopefully we'll be getting a little more regular here soon. And I think that's all we got.
And I have more videos coming out soon. So until then, me,
And Papa Mage,
I shall be back into the library.
bye.